Hey guys, welcome back to Black Rock Nissan. Today we're going to be replacing the front wheel bearings. Great thing with the Nissans, those are easy. It's a simple bolt-on. There's several options. You can go factory or you can get Moog. Timken is also an option. We're going to be replacing these with Moog, so let's get started. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about in terms of diagnosing ball joints, how do you know if you've got a bad ball joint? And when I was replacing the upper ball joints on the SPC, in that video you'll see if you hold on to the wheel at the 12 and 6 o'clock position, you could see movement on that upper ball joint. And if you look at the lower ball joint, there's potential that you could see movement there as well. So we're going to do something similar here, and I'll go ahead and throw out that if you hold the wheel at the 3 and 6 position, then that's also a means of checking the tie rods. So we're not going to be messing with that today, but I do want to show you that the wheel movement here when we're looking at the bearing. So how do you know it's a bearing versus ball joint? Well, one way is that there's no movement in the ball joint. That's a very distinct way of telling. First thing I'm going to do is just show you 12 and 6. Not sure if you can, how well that translates, or you can hear it. There's definite movement in that wheel. Let's make sure all the lugs are tight, which of course they are. We've still got gobs of play. And you could probably see, hope you can, the movement in the wheel. There's no movement and looking at this lower ball joint, there's no movement there either. So we're looking at a wheel bearing. What we're going to need to do at this point is we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the brake caliper. These bolts are 14. You want to make sure that you secure your caliper in a way that it's not going to fall and pull on that brake line. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the ABS cable. There we go. We're going to put that right up there. I'm just going to go ahead and mention it. I know these rotors look rough. There's been a lot of rain here lately. This vehicle's been sitting for a few weeks as I've been working on it. And so that's going to come off. That's just surface rust. That'll come off as soon as the vehicle's driven the first time. Bolts in the back are 19. So we're going to take that off, pads and all. That way we don't have to mess with that. And then your rotor comes right off. We're going to set that down so that the rotor surface is not sitting on the ground. So what we will need to do next, replacing this hub, we'll need to get this pin out. It's hard to do with one hand, and that's hard to do with a cheap pair of pliers too. Now that should be, I believe, a 32, and it is. And we're just gonna have to lock that down, keep that from spinning. Oh look. Four bolts on the back of this bearing hub assembly. Probably need a little bit of an extension. Okay, all 4 bolts are out. We're going to need to undo this clip, unplug this plug, and that'll disconnect your wheel speed sensor ABS. I don't care what anybody tells you. That plug is a pain to unplug. And there you go. There's your old bearing. Ooh, I can feel how rough that is. Here's the new one. It's pretty much reverse order. So you're going to want to make sure that your wire is in the same position and that you feed it back through your dust shield, because that shield will need to go back in place. So make sure you're not pinching any wires, and you want to make sure those holes are all lined up. And the thing to do there, we're going to feed one of these bolts through. And this initial bolt is really just to get things lined up. We're not going to tighten it. We're going to get these other bolts started, then we'll start tightening them. I suggest when you tighten the bolts that you do that in a cross pattern. That way you're not likely to get the new bearing hub assembly off kilter. So I don't think it matters how you do it, but I started with the rear left or left lower and upper right, and just tightened one about 5 or 6 turns, tightened the next one 5 or 6 turns, kind of went back and forth until it went in there. Now everything's tight. Then I went back and did the others. Something else to keep in mind, at least on this one and with the new hub, I could reach back in there. There's plenty of space to get back in there with your fingers, and I was able to tighten them up by hand pretty much all the way, and even getting them loose coming out was really easy too. So the next part is going to be rerunning your wire for your ABS wheel speed sensor, and of course this is a little challenging with one hand, but and of course that will plug back up there. The next part we want to get is the axle nut, and then once this is all assembled, we're going to put that axle pin nut back on, and then we're going to reassemble the brakes. So I'm not going to go through the brake assembly. You're going to do that just like you did taking it off. That's a no-brainer. You don't need to see me putting the wheel back in or plugging the sensor back in. So if you got any questions, let me know. But there you go.